I want to take a look at 4 psukim in the Torah, which are widely regarded as the 4 most obscure psukim in the entire Torah. And the careful analysis of this passage raises all kinds of fundamental questions and fundamental methodology in understanding the Torah. It's really quite an adventure. I'm working on it myself and sharing with you as I work through it myself. So we're going to do a little screen share here so that everybody can see the controversial text here. Okay, let's see. What do you see?
See your split screen questions and
yeah. Okay. What do you see?
Sons of God and daughters of man.
Good. Okay. So let's take a look at this passage in Torah, which I had mentioned before is widely considered to be perhaps the most obscure passage in the entire Torah. We're going to take a look at the 4 psukim, and then we're going to take a look at them in context. We're going to raise all of the questions which this little passage arouses. And then we're going to take a look at one of the approaches, the approach of Rashi. That's always a good place to start. So let's take a look at this passage. It's big enough. You can see the text. Yeah, okay. So this is right before the flood story. The Torah says the following. And it came to pass when man commenced to multiply upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of the nobles saw the daughters of man when they were beautifying themselves. By the way, this is bad translation. So I'm going to change it right in front of you. How about that?
Much better.
Okay, got that?
Yeah.
That the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of man when they were beautifying themselves. You'll see the next passage. I have a better translation. It probably just means that they were beautiful. This translation is prejudiced by Rashi, which is an interesting thing in and of itself. And they took for themselves wives from whoever they chose. And the Lord said, let my spirit not quarrel forever concerning man, because he is also flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of the nobles would come to the daughters of man, and they would bear for them. They are the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown.
So you want to change the nobles in this case also?
Yeah. So instead of here, did I? No.
Pasuk 4. Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go. Thank you. So everybody here is a partner with me in preparing the shiur. Okay. Fine. Now, I hope this passage seems cryptic to you. Let's first take a look at the larger context. Let's first see what happened before this. What happened before this is the story of Cain and Abel. Yeah, I'm not going to read through all the psukim there, just to get a sort of a bird's eye view. Cain kills Abel. Cain becomes a wanderer. And then the Torah recounts his lineage, right? So when it says, and Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, right? Hanoch, right? And then it goes on and gives a lineage of all the different generations, right? Irad was born to Enoch, etc., all the way down. Has some interesting tidbits of information not just a dry lineage, but also has some interesting allusions to certain innovations that came into being at certain times in the lineage of human history, this sort of primitive stage of human history, where it says he was the father of those who dwell in tents and have cattle, father of all those who grasp a lyre and a flute, another generation who sharpened all tools that cut copper and iron, right? And then we get this other cryptic, this whole passage is very cryptic, but the 4 psukim we're going to look at are even more cryptic than this, with regards to Lemech, with this allusion to something that's completely mysterious, where Lemech says to his wife, Ada and Zillah, hearken to my voice, wives of Lemech, incline your ears to my words, for I've slain a man by wounding him and a child by bruising him, whatever that is. Okay, so on and so forth. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and she named him Seth. And to Seth, also to him a son was born, and he's called Enosh. Then it became common to call upon the name of the Lord. Okay, that's chapter 4. Now, chapter 5 is a genealogical chart, which fascinating in itself, because we get Adam and Eve, right? And then it starts to describe the generations. And Adam lived 130 years, and he begot in his likeness after his image, and he named him Seth, shaped. What happened to Cain and Abel? Okay. And then it does just a genealogical chart. Adam to Seth, Enosh, so on and so forth, all the generations, tells how old they were when they had kids, what age they were when they died, how old they were when they died, on and on and on. And then we get to Lamech, and the Torah says that Lamech lived 182 years, and he begot a son, and he named him Noach. So it's tracing from Adam to Seth, and all the way down to Lamech, and Lamech is the father of Noach. And when we hear the word Noah, so we're already getting ready for the flood story. And then Noah has these 3 children, Shem, Ham, and Yefet. Now we get to the next chapter, chapter 6. And here's our mysterious psukim. And it came to pass when man commenced to multiply upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of the noble saw the daughters of man, when they were beautifying themselves, and they took for themselves wives from whoever. And the Lord said, let my spirit not quarrel forever concerning man who yields to flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of Elohim would come to the daughters of man, and they would bear for them. They are the mighty men of old. They were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Those are the 4 psukim we're going to be focusing on. And then the next passage is, and the Lord saw that the evil of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of his heart was only evil at the time. And then God says, I'm sick of this. I'm going to blot them out. And then we get to the flood story. Okay, everybody got the kind of narrative context here? Okay, so what I want to do now is raise the fundamental questions which have to be answered. And for this, I corrected already this translation ahead of time. I forgot that the other translations weren't good, just cutting and pasting. Got to be careful. Let's look at these psukim again.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Would you say that since the entire Torah up until now, the whole thing is very enigmatic, and therefore this story is equally, or perhaps more so, but we have to rely upon sources outside the Torah. Otherwise, we don't really know what's going on.
Well, do you mean that we're going to have to rely upon commentary?
Believe it or not, or other books, or Torah Shabbat Peh, or other.
Yeah. Of course. We're going to get there soon. But I first
Oh,
I want to try to understand what the questions that we need to solve. Okay. So let's just take a look at it one more time, these 4 psukim, and then let's talk about what needs to be addressed. So it happened when man began to multiply upon the surface of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of Elohim, God, saw that the daughters of man were beautiful, and they took for themselves wives of all they chose. Hashem said, my spirit will not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God consorted with the daughters of man, and they bore them children. They were the mighty men of the ages, men of renown. Okay.
Do you have to look at the Elohim as a singular in this kind? What if you looked at it as a plural?
Yeah, so just hang on. That's going to become very important. Now, what you're raising now, Bruce, is this is really the most fundamental issue. When the Torah refers to these B'nai Ha-Elohim and Banot Ha-Adam, who consorted with each other and created something, Nephilim. So who are the sons of God? Now you notice capital G, small g. Also, when it says, as Bruce pointed out, Elohim is actually a plural form. So we could even say, perhaps, put another ambiguity in here. Who are the sons of capital G, small g, God or gods? Who are these daughters of man? Hang on a second.
They refer to everybody, common man, or just special people?
So, good question. It's unbelievable. There's nothing here. There's almost not a word here that is clear. The term B'nai Ha-Elohim is an odd choice for a monotheistic work like the Torah. Who are these B'nai Elohim? Does it refer to an immortal being or to a human in a lofty position? Right? The sons of God or gods, capital G, small g. I thought the Torah, if anything, the Torah stands for the first of the 10 suggestions that we read yesterday in the Beit Knesset. One God. Who are these sons of God?
If you called it the powerful ones, you don't have to have such a theological problem.
That would be a way out. So we're going to find out how the different commentators treat this. We're going to see. I'll just give you a little heads up. There are going to be 3 major approaches, very different from each other, dealing with this, found among the classical commentators. And there are major, terrible, excruciating issues which are going to be raised by the 3rd and final approach, which we actually find in Jewish sources. That's just to keep you awake. Okay, how about when the Torah says, Vayikachu nashim, that whoever these B'nai Ha-Elohim are, these sons of God, gods, capital G, small g. So whoever they are, it says they took for themselves nashim, wives. Why does the Tanakh bother to tell us about their mating? Was it considered problematic? And if so, why? No, we're not answering these questions right now. I'm just pointing out these are the questions which we're going to have to deal with. Did they do something wrong? I don't know. And if they did something wrong, what was wrong about it? Okay. Next question. The phrase, Lo yadon ruchi ba'adam le'olam b'shagam hu basar. Right? My spirit will not. No one knows what this means. I read you the English translation. It kind of prejudices things. Lo yadon ruchi ba'adam. My spirit will not something in man forever, for he is also flesh. I'm trying to just give you a non-prejudiced translation. What does this phrase mean? What is Hashem's conclusion in the aftermath of the described union? God's looking at what happened, and he says, my spirit will not something in man forever because he's flesh, whatever that means. And then the Torah says, and his Vahayu Yamav Me'avesrim Shana, his days will be 120 years. In this statement, Hashem appears to limit man's lifespan to 120 years. Is this a punishment or just a statement of fact? If it's a punishment, how does it fit the crime, if there was a crime? Moreover, how is one to understand how in subsequent stories in the Torah, there are numerous characters who live well past this age? So if God's saying, oh, okay, no more longevity, now 120, but it's not true. There's a lot of characters live longer than 120 after this episode. These are just phrases now that need to be explained. When the Torah says then, Nephilim, Hayu Ba'aretz, the Nephilim were then in the land. Who were these Nephilim? What is their connection to the Bnei HaElohim, the sons of gods, and the Benot HaAdam, and the daughters of man, mentioned above? And the Torah also mentioned Giburim. Who are the Giburim? Are they positive or negative characters? And do they have any relationship to the only other time in the Torah where the word Nephilim appears, which is in context of the spies? The spies come back from Eretz Israel and say they saw the Nephilim, Bnei Anak. Are these the same Nephilim? And what are they? And the Torah then says, the Gam Achareichen, that they also afterwards, they lived also afterwards. What does that mean? This phrase would seem to suggest that the Nephilim were around also after the events of the story. They lived then, the Gam Achareichen, and even afterwards. After what? After the flood, which we're about to read about? I thought everybody perished in the flood. Almost every phrase is inexplicable. Now let's look at the context and raise the questions that the context raises. Our story is sandwiched between a genealogy, which lists the descendants of Shet, remember that? And the description of the flood. That's where it appears. Do either of these narratives bear on our text? You would think that there's some kind of connection between the different events described by the Torah. Is the line of Shet somehow important for understanding the players in our passage? Is Hashem's resolution to destroy the world, which is the next episode, the flood story, right? Is that a reaction to this story? A reaction to the deeds of the sons of God, gods, and daughters of men? If so, what was so terrible about the union that resulted in the total annihilation of mankind? So we don't understand the contextual link between what came before it, the genealogical line of Shet, and this story. Neither do we understand the connection between this story and what comes afterwards, which is the flood story. And finally, the purpose of the story. One of the most troubling aspects of the story is its very existence in the Torah. The text could have flowed naturally straight from the birth of Noah into the story of the flood. The genealogical chart of Shet, which appeared before this, traced lineage from Adam to Shet all the way down to Noah. And he had 3 sons. And then we should hear the flood story, that God saw how immoral, how much Hamas, robbery, whatever it means, Hamas happened, and he decided to destroy the world. If you were to cut out this episode, these 4 psukim, the Torah would lack nothing. As a matter of fact, the Torah would read more smoothly.
Well, why say that? Because with the story in there, it might be a reason for the flood if we think there's a cause and effect.
Maybe, but maybe not. Because let's just go back. Right? Here's the lineage. And the last chapter, the last verse in chapter 5, right? And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Yefet. Okay. Now, here are the problematic psukim. Let's just skip them. And then we get to, and the Lord saw that the evil of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of his heart was only evil at the time. And the Lord regretted that he had made man upon the earth, and he became grieved in his heart. And the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I've created, blah, blah, blah. Right? And look at this. And these are the generations of Noah. Noah was right son who was perfect in his generations. Noah walked before God. Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yefet. Now the earth was corrupt before God. I already know about Shem, Ham, and Yefet. That was mentioned before the problematic 4 psukim. And here, if we were to wipe out, just cut out those 4 psukim, and even the several psukim afterwards, and just restart the narrative with, these are the generations of Noah. And then it says why. Now the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth became full of robbery. That's a certain translation of Hamas. So that explains why, that God saw that the earth was corrupt and the earth became full of robbery. What kind of robbery is being discussed in those 4 psukim? So if you were to cut out the first verses of chapter 6 from here, and it came to pass when man commenced to multiply on the face of the earth, cut it out all the way down to, these are the generations of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Yefet, and God looks down and sees that the earth is corrupt, full of robbery, and all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth, and God says to Noah, I'm getting rid of everything, build a boat. It flows much better and supplies the reason. Now you can imagine contemporary academic study of the Torah, which sees the Torah as a composite of documents produced by various people in various time periods. You can imagine that they would say, and they do say, that whoever edited these documents didn't do a very good job. And that, in fact, we should do exactly as what we sort of suggested could have been done, and that is go from the story of the lineage of Shet, tracing it all the way down to Noah, cut out completely the beginning of chapter 6, and continue the story with, we mentioned Noah's sons, and then God identifies what the cause of the need to destroy the earth is. It was corrupt before God, and the earth became full of robbery, and God decides to destroy everything, and he tells Noah to build a boat. So this is problematic. If any passage in the Torah is perfect fodder for the documentary hypothesis, this approach towards understanding the genesis of the Torah coming from 19th century German Protestant scholars and some Jews. And nowadays, if you don't believe in the documentary hypothesis, more or less in the academic world, you can't be an academic. It's considered to be gospel. Okay. Now, we're going to start with Rashi. We'll take a look at Rashi, and I want to see, after we look at Rashi, if we can answer all of these questions. Okay? So, let's look at Rashi. Now, the first thing you have to do in Rashi is answer the question, and everybody, this is sort of the parting of ways. Who are these Bnei HaElohim? And who are these Benot HaAdam? These sons of Elohim and the daughters of man. Let's see what Rashi says. Bnei Elohim, the sons of Elohim, the sons of princes and rulers. Well, Rashi's definitely telling you that they are not supernatural beings, these sons of gods. That, in fact, Elohim means princes and rulers. And many of you have probably heard this of Rashi.
No, that's why I
Now,
said the powerful ones.
yeah. Another explanation of B'nai Elohim is that these were princely angels. They're angels. They're divine beings, semi-divine beings, let's call it, who came as messengers from God. They, too, intermingled with them, the daughters of men. So Rashi seems to bring two explanations. I'm going to show you something really interesting, the problematics of trying to understand Rashi in just a moment. It seems to bring two explanations. One is that Elohim means powerful people, princes and rulers. And then he says another explanation, maybe they're angels. And then Rashi says, wherever the word Elohim occurs in scriptures, it signifies authority. It means a powerful people or powerful something. And the following passages prove this. And he quotes Psukim from the book of Exodus, and thou shalt be his Elohim. See, I've made thee Elohim. Does anybody remember the context where the Torah uses this word Elohim? Rashi quotes twice. To whom the word Elohim refers to? Anybody recall? It's Moshe. The Torah refers to Moshe as Elohim. Now, the Torah certainly doesn't mean that Moshe is a god. It means a person of authority, person of position of authority. And we also see, it's interesting that Rashi doesn't quote that the word Elohim is used in the Torah to refer to human judges.
Why wouldn't for Moshe be a singular form of Elohim?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let's just give the easiest answer for now, and that is the Torah uses this kind of majestic plural. Whenever it's referring to authority, it uses this plural. Now, does anybody notice something? You have to be super awake to notice this. In the flow of this Rashi, there's something problematic about the way it's set up. Let's divide this Rashi into its components. The first thing he gives you is the definition of Elohim. It means people of authority. Then he gives you an alternative explanation. Maybe it means angels. And then he says the word Elohim means authority. And he gives you examples of that. Does anybody notice anything inelegant about the way this Rashi reads?
Well, the middle, I mean, it's not set up smoothly, right?
Why?
He's interjecting supernatural between two naturals.
Oh, so you're saying that Rashi starts out by saying this means human beings who are in positions of authority. Then he gives you an alternative explanation, and then he gives you a proof text. But Bruce, are you suggesting that proof text
Goes back to number
only is a
one.
proof text for his first interpretation, not the second?
Yes, unless princely angels is really messengers all along. It doesn't have to be supernatural. I don't know why he stuck the angel part in there. He just could have said they're powerful ones that came as messengers from God. Or again, even God, he could have used. They were messengers from the powerful ones as well. I mean, stick with with Elohim as powerful ones throughout the story.
Okay, so I want to show you something interesting. Do you notice that this edition of the Rashi translation cites Genesis Rabbah, right, 26:13, right? That's because, as I said many, many times, 98.6% of Rashis are a paraphrase of a Talmudic Midrashic source. Let's take a look at the source of Rashi. So we're going to go to Breshit Rabbah, right here. And let's read it in Hebrew. Vayiru v'nei Elohim, right? Midrash quotes our verse that the Bnei Elohim, whatever they are, they saw these Benot Adam, these daughters of men. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Kare Lahon Bnei Dayanaya. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, famous personality, he would translate this phrase into Aramaic, Bnei Elohim, as Bnei Dayanaya. Dayanaya, if we say Dayan, might be more familiar, Hebrew form of that word, right? What's a Dayan? A judge, a person in a position of authority. More significantly, Midrash Rabbah goes on, that's Rashi, people of authority, Bnei Elohim. Midrash goes on, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai mekalel l'chol man dekari lahon b'nei Elohaya. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai would curse anybody who called them b'nei Elohaya. B'nei Elohaya is the Aramaic translation of Bnei Elohim. That's a literal translation. So Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, if you translate Bnei Elohim in the way that the word Elohim, in the vast majority of times that the word Elohim appears in the Torah, which is a reference to God, or gods, a deity. So if you say that the sons of deities, or the sons of the deity, saw the sons of man and reproduced with them, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai would curse you. He thinks there's something terrible about that. And now, Tani Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai goes on, Kol pirza she'ena mina gedolim, ena pirza. So this translation, which I got off the internet, any demoralization. A pirza means to breach normative behavior. It means a breach. A pirza is a breach, an offense. When normative behavior is breached, if it's not from the Gedolim, the powerful people in society, it's not considered to be a breach. What does that mean? It's very significant that whatever behavior took place here by these people in authority, its significance is precisely because of the fact there are people in authority. Because once leadership ignores ethical norms, then all society crumbles. That's Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's explanation of why it's significant that this breach of normative behavior was engaged in by leadership, people of authority. Because then people look to our leaders. If that's the way our leaders act, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, or something like that. Right? Now, does anybody notice anything strange? If this is the source of Rashi, this statement by Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, what is very perplexing if Rashi was looking at this Midrash Rabbah?
It doesn't refer to angels. It's still natural.
Yeah, that these Bnei Elohim are people of power, people of authority. Not only that, how does Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai relate to the suggestion that maybe it means sons of deities or the deity? What does he think of that?
I don't know if he refers to that. He just...
No, he does. He curses. He curses anybody who would say that. Right? Where it says, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai would curse anyone who would call them sons of Elohim. Right?
Meaning he doesn't want to refer to anything supernatural. Because it's
he feels strongly about it. He cursed anybody. It's not a legitimate view. Now, go back to Rashi. Right? So our Rashi, which we already noticed is problematic, because Rashi gave the explanation that it means natural beings, people in positions of authority, and then says another explanation and says that they're supernatural, they're angels, and then gives a proof text which only proves the first point, not the second, that they're in fact natural human beings in positions of authority. So it's very awkwardly written. The proof texts from Shmot, where Elohim means a human being, in this case Moshe Rabbeinu, should have followed immediately after the first explanation. That's why, and guess what? We have a manuscript of Rashi in which, where it says another explanation of Bnei Elohim is that they were angels, does not appear. Now everything makes perfect sense. That view that they're supernatural beings, they're angels, Rashi did not say that. And if you cut up that sentence, everything is beautiful. Rashi says they are not angelic beings. They are human beings in positions of authority. And the proof text is that Elohim appears several times in the Torah, meaning a human being. And now we are not perplexed by the fact that Rashi is following Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai himself said anybody who would interpret it as being an angelic, supernatural being should be cursed. Rashi does not quote that view. That view does not appear in Rashi in manuscripts, only in the printed editions. Okay. So this is really important. You start with Rashi. We want to know what Bnei Elohim means according to Rashi. Rashi's the basic infrastructure of how we begin to look at the psukim in the Torah. And if you look at Rashi in any printed Chumash, it becomes legitimate to see these Bnei Elohim as supernatural beings. But we just pointed out, Rashi never said it. It doesn't make any sense that Rashi would say it. So why is it here? Very simple. And we have thousands and thousands of examples like this in our holy books. Before the printing press, if you want to get a copy of Rashi, someone's going to have to copy it over. Now, somebody was copying over Rashi and put a marginal note. By the way, we have physical evidence of this process in manuscripts. People would write in the margins. Some of you probably write notes in books you read. Someone's copying over Rashi, and they said, I know of another opinion that says Bnei Elohim actually means angels or some kind of divine beings. Another explanation. They wrote it on their copy of Rashi as their own comment. Along comes somebody who then copies that text as Rashi, and he inserts the comment written by the scribe who copied over Rashi, who added his own 2 cents worth, saying, as referring to angelic beings. But the copyist now puts that into the text of Rashi. And then a printer got that copy of Rashi. And from that time on, that explanation that these are angelic beings appears in every edition of printed Rashi I'm aware of. And it's almost for sure not Rashi. Well, I'll be monkey's uncle.
Yeah, why don't they put a footnote of that so that's known? I mean,
if you look in some editions that have come out in recent years, they do have a footnote that says that, but not in the standard editions, and it's very confusing and more than confusing. After all, that view, which now appears in Rashi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would curse anybody who would espouse that view. There must be something very unseemly about that approach, which we're going to get to.
Not only that, isn't Rashbi more of a mystic who might like that type of a translation?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, Rashi definitely, uh, Rashi didn't write philosophical works. So,
No,
so
Rashbi. Rashbi.
oh,
Rashbi.
Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that also occurred to me. How fascinating it is that we might have thought Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, of all people, would have been favorably disposed to such a translation, that these are angelic supernatural beings. So the fact that he, who is purported to be the author of the Zohar, would curse anybody who'd say that these are some kind of supernatural beings must mean that something is really wrong to suggest that these are supernatural beings. Okay, very good point. I also I had a discussion with one of my kids over Shabbat, exactly in this issue, because he's very enthralled with the Zohar, and I pointed out to him that it's a little strange that the purported, you're going to see that the Zohar actually has in it the view that these are supernatural beings. We'll see that eventually. So, which Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wrote the Zohar? Like, he curses anybody who says they're supernatural beings in Midrash Rabbah, but in the Zohar, he says that they're supernatural beings. That's rather strange.
I hate to bring this up, but you are from California. Are the only choices natural and supernatural?
You have some other ideas?
Well, something not human, but not supernatural.
Well, I'm not. Well, the only other explanation would be like an animal. I'm not sure what's between. Like, it's either natural or supernatural. I'm not sure what's between.
Well, there's a whole genre of writing that discusses other non-human entities. That's all. Not animals. Not from the. Angels too are not from this earth. Things that are not from this earth. Rulers,
Okay.
powerful ones, not from this earth.
Well. I mean, I would just right now just lump them all in the supernatural, right? But we'll get to that in much more detail than you would ever want in just a little while. Now, I want to go through the rest of the story and see if we can answer our fundamental questions according to Rashi. Now, Rashi also points out when it says that these Bnei Elohim, which are these people in positions of authority, they saw these Benot Adam, these daughters of men. Now, by the way, it's pretty clear if Bnei Ha-Elohim, according to Rashi, means people in positions of authority, powerful people, then what are Benot Adam, the daughters of Adam? I mean, in contrast, what we'd have to say, they're what? Commoners, right? So according to Rashi, these people that are powerful see these attractive women, right? The Torah says, Ki tovot hena, they're beautiful. Rashi quotes a midrash. Rabbi Yehuda said is written here, tovot, without the vav. For when they're being made to appear good by being decked out to be taken beneath the marriage canopy, one of the lords would come and carry her off first. So Rashi quotes a midrash from Midrash Rabbah that that if you had any of your daughters get married, they spend a lot of money on this hire a hairdresser, a cosmetician, whatever they're called, put on makeup, right? And so they're looking really more beautiful than they normally look. The kala, and a very expensive dress. We have a daughter who's getting married pretty soon, and these powerful people would say to the I'm elaborating a little bit. They say to the husband, the groom, excuse me, I hope you won't mind, but before you marry this beautiful woman here, we're going to have to sample her first. And they would then have sex with the bride before she actually goes under the chuppah with her husband. That's a midrash according to that Rashi quotes Midrash Rabbah also.
Well, you know that the Syrian Greeks did that.
That right, the Gemara mentions in certain places called sort of the rite of first intercourse. It's unbelievable, okay? But apparently there's some historical basis for this. And then the Torah said that they would take these mates, these powerful people, of all whom they would choose. And Rashi again quotes Midrash Rabbah, even if we're talking about a married woman or another man or an animal. So these were equal opportunity providers. These powerful people, they would have relations, they have sex forced upon even a woman who's about to get married, a woman who's already married, another man, an animal. They were very indiscriminate. Okay. Then God sees this and he says, my spirit shall not strive against man. This very difficult phrase in the Torah, right? Lo yadon ruchi badam. So Rashi understands this as to be in a state of discontent. And there are reasons for that, which we will discuss as we go on. So God says, this is disturbing, but I'm not going to allow myself to be disturbed forever, right? Leolam, that's the next phrase in that verse, for a long time. Behold, my spirit has been contending within me whether to destroy or whether to show mercy. But such deliberation shall not be forever, right? I'm going to soon decide what to do with them. And then the Torah has this also very difficult expression for that he also is flesh. I don't want to get into the problematics right now of that. There's a problem with the vocalization. The Torah says shagam, as if there's a verb, shagam. If it was the shin, short for asher, shet, it should be bishegam, but it's bishagam. So without getting involved in that, Rashi just says it's the same thing as bishegam, that he is also flesh. Will be the point, because this quality is also in him, that he's only flesh, and yet he does not humble himself before me. You think you're such hot stuff, you powerful people in society, that you think you can go have sex with anybody you want to, that you're going to take these women who are about to get married and you're going to rape them, rape whoever you want to, another man, an animal, doesn't matter to you. You're just human beings. Can you imagine if you had powers which were superhuman? How terrible the situation of the earth would be. And then God says, therefore his days shall be, right? 120. So what does that mean according to Rashi? For 120 years, I'll be long suffering with them. Interesting. Rashi is not saying that therefore you only live 120. He says, I'm going to give 120 years, and then my patience is going to wear out, right? I'm not going to deliberate internally with what to do about you forever. I'm going to give you 120 years. Let's see if you can do tshuva. For 120 years, I'll be long suffering with them. And if they repent not, I shall bring a flood upon them. Okay. So I'll skip to the next Rashi. So these B'nai Elohim, powerful people society, raped these women, and the results are Nephilim. What are Nephilim? Rashi says they're giants. Nephilim are giants. But why are they called Nephilim? There's a different word in the Torah for giants. They're called Nephilim because they fell and caused the downfall of the world. So Nephilim, nafal means to fall. They fell in their moral stature, and they caused the falling of the moral stature of the whole world. That's how Rashi explains it. Okay? And they were then, and they're also afterwards. What does that mean? So Rashi says this refers not to after the flood. What's this before and after, if it's not the flood? So Rashi basing himself again upon Midrash Rabbah. Although they witnessed the destruction of the generation of Enosh, when the ocean rose and flooded a third part of the world, yet the generation of the flood did not humble itself and take a lesson from them. So this is something you would never know by reading the Torah. There's a midrash that says that God the generation of Enosh earlier than this story. God had sent a warning signal, a tsunami, like was just recently in the Pacific Ocean. God made a kind of preliminary flood. A third of the world was flooded to give a little warning to human beings.
You know that archaeologically they have identified many, many floods of large magnitude. So
yeah, whatever. So according to this midrash, when it talks about there were Nephilim before then and after them, it means before the flood. That was not Noah's flood, a previous flood, and afterwards. Yet the warning, it didn't do what it should have done, and they continued in their immoral ways. Okay, now the offspring of the hang on one second. The offspring of this union between these people of authority and these women were these Nephilim, these powerful people, giant people, and they're called Giburim. What are Giburim? It's not a new species. They're Giburim in the sense of being very chutzpahdik. That's how Rashi understands it. Giburim in rebellion against God. Anshe Shem, men of renown, right? Rashi understands that as their shame being literally, that they had names which reflected what's going to happen to them. That if you take a look at the different names that are used here, they're all allusions to destruction. And then he quotes another explanation that it also could, the shame might mean name, but from the word shimamon, which means destruction. So either way you understand it, Anshe Shem means these are people whose very names or what's going to occur to them allude to the impending devastation. Yes, Bruce, you were going to say something.
Are you going to get to the Enoch version of Nephilim?
Yeah, we're going to get there. That's going to be what made Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai so upset. We'll get there later. Now, what I want to do is go through the questions now, the fundamental questions, and see if we can understand these questions according to Rashi. So, the first question was, who are these Bnei HaElohim and Benot HaAdam? Well, according to Rashi, it's very clear. They are powerful people in society and who took advantage of, raped the common daughters. Okay? And so the question about being Bnei Elohim, that's an odd choice for monotheistic work like the Torah, right? So we've solved that problem according to Rashi because it's not referring to any kind of supernatural being. This is all human dismal history. Okay. Then what about the Torah referring to they took for themselves wives? Why does Tanakh bother to tell us about their mating? Was it considered problematic? And if so, why? Well, that's obvious. It's problematic because they were raping the women. It was problematic because they were mating with fellow males. It's problematic because they were mating with animals. Right? So we're talking about a society of lawlessness among the leadership, of the powerful exploiting those who are less powerful, where all sense of sexual norms has been destroyed.
Well, it does say that they just took women that they felt like. It doesn't expound upon other affairs and like throwing animals and homosexuality.
Yeah.
They just took the women that they felt like taking.
Yeah. So, but it is interesting that Rashi quotes the Midrash Rabbah because you see the Torah itself alludes to the fact that it's something more than rape. The reason that Rashi, that the Midrash says that, is because the Torah says here, it says they took for themselves as sexual partners mikol asher baharu, from all. So in typical Midrashic methodology, that word from all is to expand the scope. And that's why it refers to homosexuality and to bestiality, according to the Midrash. Okay. Now, how about this? This thing about my spirit will not contend with man forever, right? I'm going to have a limit how much I'm giving them an opportunity to do tshuva. And if this is how they behave when they're human beings, you can imagine what would happen if they had superpowers. So we explained what that means according to Rashi, right? And what is Hashem's conclusion after the described union? His decision is, I'm going to give them a chance to do tshuva, and if they don't shape up, they're out of here. Okay. Now, what about the being 120? In this statement, Hashem appears to limit man's lifespan to 120 years. Well, according to Rashi, he doesn't understand it that way at all. Rashi understands the reference to 120 as how long God is going to give them before he destroys the planet. He'd give them some time to do tshuva. So is this a punishment or a statement of fact? So it's neither, according to Rashi. It's a threat. You have 120 years to do tshuva, if not. Okay? If the former house fit the crime, not relevant according to Rashi. Moreover, how is one to understand how in subsequent stories in Torah there are numerous characters who live well past this age? No problem at all. So according to Rashi, it's not a question of how old people are going to live, how long they're going to live, but rather a question of giving them time to do tshuva. Now, what about these Nephilim that were lent in the land? Who are these figures, and what is their connection to both the Bnei Elohim and Benot Adam? Rashi says that Bnei Nephilim, this is a reference to the aristocrats themselves. They are Nephilim, they bear Nephilim. These are people who fell in moral stature and caused the moral tenor of society to fall. And to the Giburim mentioned afterwards, according to Rashi, the Giburim are the same as the Nephilim. These are people who have gvura, have audacity, chutzpah, in the way they relate to divine morality. Are they positive or negative characters? According to Rashi, obviously negative. Do they have any relationship to Nephilim Bnei Anak, of whom the spies speak in Bamidbar? Rashi doesn't seem to address that here, so we'd have to just speculate. And when it says also afterwards, so remember, according to Rashi, here, this phrase would seem to suggest the Nephilim were around also after the events of the story. If did not everyone from this area perish in the flood? Rashi answered that, because it's not referring to the flood. It's referring to the unmentioned in the Torah, but appearing in the oral Torah, this warning flood, which had happened in the generation of Enosh, where a third of the earth was inundated with water. And so Rashi avoids that problem of having these Nephilim survive the flood. Okay, well, quickly now answer the next questions here. What about the context here? Now, it comes right after the descendants of Sheth, right? And right before the flood. Do either of these narratives bear on our text? Well, it's not 100% clear according to Rashi what the connection is between the genealogical list coming before this, but it's very clear what the relationship coming afterwards. This is tell you why God destroyed the earth. God decided to destroy the earth because of this apex of immorality. That, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, even when the leadership is corrupt, then all fences, all attempts at maintaining morality in society fall apart and crumble. Is the line of Shet somehow important for understanding the players in our passage? According to Rashi, I didn't see an answer to that question. Is Hashem's resolution to destroy the world? Mention the verse immediately following the text, reaction to the deeds of Elohim and Adam. For sure, right? Rashi's responding to the immorality. If so, what was so terrible about the union that resulted in the total annihilation of mankind? Rape. The fact that these people of power use their power to satisfy their sexual drive in a way which was utterly outside of any kind of bounds of morality.
Well, would that be written to destroy the world? I mean, it seems a rather strict response to rape.
Yeah. So maybe we have to, I used to have a Rebbe when I was in yeshiva, he would say, take away the question mark and put a period. Maybe we're learning something about the centrality of sexual morality.
Right.
What's the purpose of the story? Okay, one of the most troubling aspects of this is its very existence in the Torah. So, according to Rashi, we understand is actually your point right now, Bruce, is to tell us what gives the earth the right to exist, and upon what basis does the earth lose its right to exist? And it's based upon this unbridled use of authority and power, and especially in the sexual realm. Okay, well, that's pretty heavy. In the next 2 weeks, we're going to take a look, and we'll see maybe how fast we go. Maybe it might be 1 week, see what happens. We're going to take a look at 2 more approaches to the story, completely different. Each of these approaches will begin with the question of who are the Bnei Elohim and who are the Bnot Adam.
I'm surprised.
This approach, I'm sorry?
I'm surprised that the word Nephilim doesn't have various multiple interpretations that would lead to where you're going to go in the story of Enoch. There's no source for that in our sources outside of Enoch.
So you'll see that the word Nephilim does appear differently. It does mean something differently, depending upon how you understand Bnei Elohim and Bnot Adam.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to point out that this approach here seems to be the sort of safe approach of Rashi. It avoids very problematic issues. So the next 2 approaches that we'll see will become more problematic as we go from the second, and then to the third is extraordinarily problematic. We'll see how to deal with that approach. Okay, everybody, stay tuned.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Fascinating topic. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye now.